I'm Charles Roberts, the Executive Director and founder of Rhode Island Slavery Company Battalion. And as you know, we mark the landscape with the history of people of color and their contribution to the state. And this is one of the very special locations for us, because this is the place where the enslaved era transformed to the emancipated era. Because this used to be a building owned by the Trinity Church, and it was a school for white kids. And I mean, you've had David Stewart here, went here, attended here, and another person, oh, I just forgot his name, who was the first person to test smallpox. Yeah, so I mean, the people that went to Trinity Church were very famous people, and then they sold the school to Reverend Kelly. Now, Reverend Kelly was an escaped slave, and he formulated this church, and then after him became Reverend Jeter. Now, Reverend Jeter spoke here for 40 years, and he was an emancipated slave. So you can see in this location, the place where we stand is holy ground, because this place marks the landscape of where the transition from the slave era to the emancipated era. And you're standing in it. And thanks to the drum, you got a chance to participate in this by saving this beautiful place, so that here on Historic Hill, like many others, that are the actual place where our ancestry took place. You're walking in the footsteps of your ancestors when you're here. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm proud to mark the landscape in 16 locations across the state of Rhode Island, 8 here in the Historic District alone. I mean, we were putting up medallions even when they were COVID. Because they're stone and bronze, and they're a permanent history. This is a history that once it's marked, it won't go away. It's very important that we mark the locations where our ancestry took place. And I'm talking about American, I'm not just talking about black people's slavery, I'm talking about American history. Because these are the examples of where American history took place. And we're standing them. I mean, I have Mrs. Gatchell has two locations, the Samuel Hopkins house and the Peter Moore's house. We just marked the landscape there. Of course, you know about the Dutchess Camino right across the street. And we've got, every year we manage to put at least 2 medallions on bronze medallions on granite pedestals. The pedestals are 2 tons, you know, and so even selecting them so that they can be brought here is a feat unto itself. And we're glad to be able to provide the state of Rhode Island with the encouragement to bring tourists here to see our history take place right where we stand. And I'm fortunate enough to say that in my quest for public art, because these medallions are public art, you're marking the landscape with art, not just historical monuments. They're art. But I'm fortunate enough to, by studying art, to study the art of this person I'd like to bring forward. Vinny, would you come forward, please?
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming.
This is Vinnie Bagwell.
This is Rio.
And I mean, I must say, when I saw her garden of art, of sculpture in Yonkers, and saw the statue she made of Ella Fitzgerald, I mean, I was just dumbfounded. And so I just, when I felt like I selected somebody to do this work, it had to be a woman of color who is a sculptor. It's one of the first to get commissions in Yonkers. And I mean, and talking to her is like talking to a sister, and I'm going to let you talk, her talk, because so that you can see the personality that is bringing us our fabulous monument of George to Downing. Go ahead, you tell them.
Thank you.
You're the artist.
Thank you. You know, God has his own ideas, I swear. I'm a born artist, and in 1993 I decided I was going to try sculpting. And over the years I tried stuff and it works. Like same thing with painting. I tried painting, I can't paint. And so history is the memory of people. And communities have certain kind of values, and you can tell what the value is by how they punctuate their community with art. So I'm looking around my community, and all I'm seeing is dead presidents and war heroes. And you know, I'm really starting to become aware, and all I'm seeing is dead presidents and war heroes. And so at the time I was a writer, a newspaper writer, so everybody knew me, which was helpful. And I wrote a proposal to the city of Yonkers to do Ella Fitzgerald, because everybody knows and loves Ella Fitzgerald. And so they said yes, and they gave me a fraction of the money. Of course. And I went to the foundry and I cried. I used to cry a lot back then. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with a third of the money? And they said, don't worry, we're going to take care of you. I'm like, what does that mean? Don't worry, we're going to take care of you. And so Ella died while I was working on the sculpture. And it upset me because I thought she was going to see it. I didn't know that she was already blind. We didn't have internet back then, you know, we got the news all late. And so I get a phone call from the city of New York. It's the commissioner for cultural affairs. And she wants to know how I won this thing. And I said to her, I didn't win, I asked for it. So she wanted to know, well, who was in charge of the design committee? I'm like, what design committee? The design committee. And I'm like, oh, there's no design committee. Well, who approved this thing? I'm like, well, I asked for the money and they gave it to me. Yeah, but it could look like me. I said, but it doesn't. And so she said, did I tell you who I am? I'm like, yeah. So she says, do you realize that you're creating the first public artwork of a contemporary African-American woman to be commissioned by a municipality in the United States of America? I said, could you repeat that? I'm going to write it down. So she repeats it. I said, can I put this on my resume? Yes, you may. So fast forward, in 2022, I get a phone call from the Grand Marquis, who's who, whatever. And I think it's a joke. And they're like, no, you've been recommended. Actually, you have a twofer. And I'm like, well, what's the second thing? She says, well, you've done the first sculpture for contemporary African-American in Connecticut, too. I mean, you have the first one, you have two. I'm like, oh. So, of course, they make you pay for that. But the point of it is that I wasn't really trying to do that. I was just trying to represent, because I knew in my community, black people and white people revered this woman. And the idea was that it's a woman, it's a black woman, it's somebody from the community, somebody that we all love, it's somebody that the world respects, and I think it's important that we say this, like we mean it. So fast forward, in 2023, she got vandalized for the first time. Oh. Really upset me, because I live across the street, she's at the train station. Swastikas on her crotch. Oh my God. And I'm like, who does that? You know, so I called up the city, had a temper tantrum. And you know, the planning commissioner said, Vinnie, we already had the meeting. It's my job to find the money. Just tell me what you want. And so we had it restored. But the thing of it is that the city was responsive because they understood the value of the artwork. And of course, there's a lot of things that I did with the city of Yonkers between then and 1993. You know, Yonkers was a blighted city. It's on the waterfront. We got 4 miles of Hudson Riverfront property that they were doing nothing with. Of course, now it's been gentrified and they're building 4,000 new residents, luxury housing, you know, on the waterfront, and it's punctuated with art, and there are 3 galleries, and, you know, we're now talking about quote-unquote economic development and tourism, and, you know, money's coming in, and people who used to say, I don't like Yonkers, now it's like, when they say that, it's like, oh, you're showing your ignorance, you haven't been to Yonkers lately, you need to come. The point of it is that Yonkers has evolved, it has grown. I've lived there long enough, I left, I came back, and I have seen how art in public places has transformed the community. So now, I have what you call a boilerplate. And so in 2020, when George Floyd was killed and the whole world decided they're going to co-sign with black people, like America, cut it out, New York Times is calling me, art forums, everybody's calling me because I'm the queen, and they want to know what I think. And I'm like, I think that communities should create art that they value about their community. Like, we have the icons. We've got Frederick Douglass, we've got Martin Luther King, we've got Harriet Tubman, we've got Sir George. What about George T. Downing? What about him? You know, somebody that the community knows, somebody that the community respects, you know, someone who helped build the community. That's what I think we should be building all over the country. And so it's been a phenomenal time since 2020, where people all over the country now are looking at their communities and realize we look racist. we gotta think of something to do. And so they're finding people that they review the most. I was saying a little earlier that, you know, 95% of the public artworks in the country, talking about representational figurative artworks, 95% of them are done by white men about white men. And that's real cool, except for, okay, that 5% is women and people of color. And, you know, before now, we were talking about balancing the narrative. It's not about necessarily diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's about telling the whole story.
Yes.
It's about balancing the narrative. There are a lot of people who are American who contribute to a community being what a community is. And so I'm very excited about him. You know, when Charles first called me, I was like, this is Fred. This is Fred. I'm like, oh, so good. So of course, you know, I've spent 10 years working for Nordstrom, men's sportswear. I love men's clothing. And I said, let me check out the men's clothing of that era. And I'm like, ooh, frock coats. Yes, and frock coats. Ooh. I'm like, I'm gonna dress them all the way up. And I'm a storyteller, so I wrote him a little story. And one night I called Charles, I said, let me give you my backstory. He's going to the convention where they dress, okay? Men, not just black men, men used to dress all the way up. You know, my daughter got married a couple of years ago, and the flower girl didn't want to wear a dress. Oh. And I was like, okay, you gotta give her a little lecture. First of all, there's something called getting dressed all the way up. You get your hair done. You get to wear makeup when you're 10. You get your nails done. You get to wear jewelry. You get new shoes. You get a handbag. You know, you get dressed. Of course, I'm old enough to know this because when I was a kid, that's what we used to do. There was a time, a lot of times, it was a wedding where you got to get dressed all the way up. So I'm like, I'm dressing him all the way up. He's going somewhere. And I told Charles, I said, well, they're not going to be able to say no to this, okay? Because this is the epitome of class for that era. He's fly. Now, mind you, Frederick Douglass is the most photographed man in history. Right. Still. Right. The most photographed person in history. And every time you see Frederick Douglass, he's fly. Yeah. I'm like, if these two were hanging out, he had to be fly at the convention. This is him on the way out the door. Where his wife says, oh honey, it doesn't matter what you wear, they're going to respect you anyway. And he's like, no, I got to walk the walk. But anyway, I am looking forward to seeing him life-size in the world. I expect it. I don't know if you all are proponents of the secret, but the secret is ask, believe, receive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you see why I chose her to represent Frederick Douglass and his greatest Douglass friend and associate. I mean, we're talking about a time here, a time that's passed, that if we don't mark the landscape with these men, we'll lose it. Our children won't know about it. To have this monument, the only one to a person of color, on Bellevue Avenue, in Turo Park, that he helped build across from his restaurant and the art museum. I mean, what else?
That's right, that's right.
One more thing. So I take Vinnie to the site and she's looking at it and she says, Charles, you got to move it back. I said, why? It's under a tree. Birds. Oh, okay. I'll talk to the parks department. You know,
Birds and root systems.
Yeah, I mean, this might sound like a simple thing, but for an artist, that's extremely important. And that's what we look at when we're marking the landscape. So all I can say is let's make history together. Please donate to this project. And in fact, I have a pie chart that'll show you exactly what we're doing. We're fortunate enough to have it from the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Harbor Foundation, thank you. Joyce and Russell, who gave the money to make sure that Vinnie could actually make the drawings.
Yes.
Gave the money so that they could actually make the pamphlets of the history. I mean, there are people out here who are serious about this, and they stepped up to the plate just on my word. Okay? I went to the Episcopal Diocese the other day and I said, you know, you guys are about curriculum, about inclusion. You're the church. What you going to do about this? He said, well, Charles, what would you like? And he said, well, Charles, when? Right now. And so they partially funded this event for today. That's Bishop Madison. I want to bring up a friend of mine, John Brooks, who's kind of been a financial advisor and really helped me to see what it takes to make a capital campaign. And since he's a capitalist, don't you go ahead, John.
I'll say a couple of words. First, thank you, Michelle.
And Bob up there.
I told Charles I would say a few words here tonight for a couple of reasons. One, every nonprofit in town and in our state, as most of you will know by now, are struggling horribly. You know, I've spent almost 2 weeks now trying to figure out how to get more food to the food banks back into Martin Luther King. How do we get the new CCBAC program, which is Certified Community-Based Mental Health, which will become the center to hopefully replace the food programs, to hopefully replace the primary care physician centrist. These things are quite centrist to all of us in Rhode Island, particularly as we lose about, I'm going to guess at this point, $2.5 billion worth of funding in the state. And today was no exception. We had our SAMHSA funding cut today by Mr. Kennedy, the cabinet director of Health and Human Services. But when we go to organizations like this, and I've been close to Mr. Charles, as I call him, now for about, I don't know, maybe 3 months, roughly in there. And a friend of ours, David Cicilline, had asked me to take a little look-see inside. And I said, Charles, after being with you and your staff for a couple of different sessions, you're like trying to catch a fart in a baseball. You got all these different ideas, but we got to focus, right? We got to focus on who we are, what we do, and why we are important. And that's not necessarily been easy. It's not easy for most of our nonprofits in town, by the way. But in Charles' organization, and as we know, we have in town, we have the Newport Restoration, we have Newport Historical, we have Keith Stokes. We got lots of people working on what I would call the black historical issues and some do them, what I would say, at a very high level, an intellectual level. What differentiates Charles, and I kept saying this to him, and I didn't think he quite got it until recently, you know, he's telling stories from the street, all right? The real stories, the unvarnished stories, the stories that most of the white people, including Mr. The Redwood Library, no, the Redwood Library, you know, which was built by slaves. These are not necessarily stories that are comfortable, but they're important stories.
That's right.
And it's important stories that need to be maintained in a way that's different than just giving a lecture. This statute is a representation of a historical long-term investment in the right side. Now what we have to do is we all have to help Charles. It's not just necessarily just writing a check, and I suspect everybody was forced to sign in as you came in the door. I gave one lecture at Carnegie down in New York City. That's the lecture about how deep you got to dig, because you can't dig deep enough. All right? I'll leave that to this young lady over here. She'll reach out to you. But what I think we have an opportunity on Historic Hill to spread the word.
Yes.
House by house, person by person, friend by friend. You know, what is a Rhode Island slave history medallion organization? What does Charles do? A lot of you have some understanding of it. Some of you have actually gone online and read about it. What you don't know is Charles is very bashful. He doesn't like asking for money. That's not a very good position to be in, Charles, in the nonprofit.
I learned that one the hard way.
You got to like smack it out. At least today I saw you had your hand out. That was a real positive step. I told the governor before coming over here that I would teach you how to ask. Anyway, this one simple step of spreading the word, so we can get another 8 or 10 medallions on Historic Hill, and I live next door in the Yellow House, so he can't come and burn it down. He's got to be there. This is an important step for raising money. His brand recognition, what people know about him, and what it does, and how it might help our community, and how it might help the kids in our community come to a reconciliation that their past is important, and how history helps cure emotional transitions over time. And the other piece is his organization, and he won't tell you, I'll tell you, it's struggling to make ends meet. I mean, do I borrow money against my house? Or do I, hopefully get, somebody like a Nick Scorch to, throw some money at me? And I said, well, just be careful what you want, Take it from one of his restaurants, but I don't know if I want to have Mr. Scorch give me a check. I might not necessarily feel it's appropriate, but the point I'm trying to make is each of you have two roles. If you can support financially, it's not just supporting the statue. The statue is only going to get built if the organization remains, right? So there's a box on the website that says for operational organizational expenses. I believe, Charles, if I remember, it's now moved to the top, right? Good move, right? There are 5 or 6 other boxes that you can check. But, that's an important one, because if he doesn't eat, we don't get a statue, right? So think about how to share your investment, if you would, if you could, and if you will. And think about the role that we as a Hill play in the history. And if we do this intelligently over the next few years, I think we will make a success, not only of the Hill and what people learn, but I think we might actually make Charles survive. Thank you for your time.
As I said, every organization needs a good mouthpiece. They've got to have somebody who's very versed in the community and is looking out for it, and is part of the Hill Association, who wants to see this, that I call the Williamsburg of the North, become a landmark. I'm not just talking about just one street, one building, I'm talking about the district. So that when tourists, I work with the Commerce Rhode Island, when tourists come here, they say, well, where do we go? You go to the historic district. There's 8, 10 locations where you can just use your phone and see the history of the state of Rhode Island from emancipation, from slavery to emancipation. So I've done all I can that I know because I'm an artist. I mean, I lived in Africa. I've been to the pyramids. I know that bronze and granite are permanent landmarks. And that's what we're going to do, and that's what we plan on doing. And the statue, I thought my medallions was something. This is a monument, and a monumental occasion for the state of Rhode Island and Newport. And I thank you for your support in any way possible to make this take place. Thank you.